So my name is Nicole. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Africa and an outlook from an African point of view. So this is a beautiful picture of, anybody wants to guess which city? Cape Town. So I've traveled from Casablanca to Cape Town and from Dakar, Racine's home, to Dar es Salaam, across the continent, visiting many clients. And this is a beautiful picture of Cape Town. It's also a city that's very dear to me, and I will be doing what I'm doing today, next week, in Cape Town. So let's look a little bit about Africa. Are there any Americans in the room? So there's one at the back. Okay, not. What I often have to explain is that Africa is not a country. Africa consists of several countries, 54 of them. Most recently, we've added South Sudan to that specific list. And Africa is a massive continent. You can see from the screen how many other countries actually fit onto the continent of Africa. Africa is beautifully complex, but within this complexity lies beauty as well. Multiculturalism, multi-religious, multi-language and dialects and facets that culminates on one continent. There is no other continent that houses the amount of diversity that we do within the square meterage that we cover as a continent. The Economist had a headline 2000, early 90s, that said, the hopeless continent. And that has changed over several years to become the hopeful continent. There is no other continent that has the natural resources that we have, the abundance of people that we have, the skills and the mobility within countries that we have as a continent. Africa, one can say, is really the last frontier. There is a massive focus on the continent at this stage, and I really see it as a privilege to be part of that specific journey. I hope that things in Africa would change and that we as a continent will realize our true potential. We have several leaders on the continent that has governed collectively for more than 200 years. Things are changing. Most recently, Eduardo dos Santos, the president of Angola, has decided to step down, and our good neighbor, Mr. Robert Mugabe, has also decided to step down. I also don't know why you still want to be in power when you are 92 or 93, when you can relax somewhere. So The Economist has changed the way that we look at Africa. And what is key within our continent is we need to look at stability. So some may know the term VUCA. VUCA is a military term that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. In Africa, the volatility is based around fluctuations from a political point of view, but also a currency point of view. So there's all these changes that take place within the continent. Uncertainty, legislation can change overnight. In 2017, I think there were 8 coups that took place on the continent. Some of them silent. In Zimbabwe, we called it a natural military transition, not a coup. But it was by all means a coup that took place. Complexity and ambiguous. So people often want to look for data on the continent, but data is gathered through communities, through forming relationships and the way in which business is done. What is very important on the continent is cash and benefits. In some of the countries, it's not the amount of cash that you get and the benefits that you receive, but rather what exact benefits that you receive. For instance, in Nigeria, the question is not whether you get a company vehicle or not, but rather whether the company vehicle is a 4.2-liter diesel, black with extras. If not, that may make or break a specific deal that will take place. So let's look a little bit more from an economic point of view at certain countries. Because there are 54 countries, we've decided to pick only a few across the region to give you highlights on the continent. Each country is unique. Each country, believe it or not, has its own president, own set of rules, own tax regimes. Within that is the complexity and the beauty of the continent. So if we look at the population growth in certain countries, so in 2025, I think a third of the world's population, or no, more than that, will be from Africa. China, at the moment, as we know, has the world's largest population. The most populous city or country in Africa is Nigeria, followed by Ethiopia, with around 90 million inhabitants. So if we look at the population growth, it's fairly stable, specifically also if we have a look at Morocco, when compared to South Africa, they're typically on the same level. But there's no sense in only looking at population growth with also factoring unemployment into consideration. So unemployment in South Africa is quite high. Unofficially, 46%, 45%, officially 26% from an unemployment rate. And you can see that South Africa is the highest on this specific mark, compared to other countries that we've listed here, which are Angola, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Nigeria. Morocco, in all the examples for these graphs, would be the yellow line. So Morocco, in this specific example, fairly low unemployment rate. Believe it or not, the most populous city, Nigeria, the lowest unemployment rate. They have an unemployment rate of about 2%. They count beggars as employed. That is why their unemployment rate is so low from a statistical point of view. GDP growth, if you look at this chart for the first time, there's a lot going on here. When we look at the continent, I first described it as VUCA. But what you want from an investment point of view is stability. So I want to point out two specific countries in this example. One of them is Kenya, and the other country that I want to point out is Morocco, and of course Angola. Angola, oil-rich country, natural resources. Kenya, not so much natural resources, but highly developed from a manufacturing point of view. Morocco, fairly stable from a GDP growth point of view, and that is what one is looking for when one is wanting to invest within a specific continent. So I'm going to track and compare from East Africa to West Africa, Kenya and Morocco to one another throughout the presentation. Inflation. If you are from Europe or from the United States, double-digit increases is not something that you are familiar with. However, on the continent, double-digit increases is something that we see quite often. Companies track typically inflation when giving increases. Once again, from a stability point of view, you would want to have a low level of inflation to sustain the business. So I have quite a unique view on inflation and linking that to compensation. What does inflation measure? Inflation measures the change of a basket of goods from one period to another period. It looks at the price changes of the contents of the basket of goods. So my question is, why are companies giving increases based on inflation if inflation is a basket of goods that we buy? And one can really run into trouble when looking at this. When inflation hits 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, South Sudan 400%, Venezuela 2000%, will you give a 20, 30, 40, 50% increase? Probably not. So one needs to be very careful in the way that you communicate your compensation mechanisms to employees specifically. So from a compensation trends perspective in Africa, I want to ask the audience a question. Which country do you think offers the highest level of compensation on the continent to executives? Okay, Angola. Does anybody know why? Inflation? Inflation is high. The currency is a little bit volatile at this stage as well. Exactly. One can of Coke, $6. Breakfast, $75 US. When you go to a hotel and you pay $75 US, you cannot eat yogurt and muesli for breakfast. I can't. So Angola is indeed the highest level. So what we are showing you here from a statistical point of view is the median value of the market for executives. There are some executives that earn as much as 800,000 euros in Angola per annum. The second country, close, but not quite there. DRC on executives also pay well. So there's typically Kenya, regional hub for East Africa. Well paid, well-established market, mature from a legislative point of view, both from a justice and tax point of view. And lastly, we have Morocco in third place, 127,000 euro. So you may now think, how much do I earn in comparison to 126,000 euro? An indication of where you potentially should be earning if you're an executive. Lowest paid country, not on the slide, but does anybody want to take a guess for the lowest paid? Tunisia. No, Tunisia is also quite highly paid. So lowest paid is Madagascar and Guinea-Conakry. This is for executives. Ethiopia, I've done business with a company that pays their staff $1 a day. $1 per day. The average salary, as we could see, is 57,000 euro across the board for executives. The disparity of compensation is significant on the continent. And what I've shown you here is total remuneration for local nationals. This means cash plus benefits. When we talk about compensation in Africa, we need to talk about cash and benefits that are offered in the market. There's also varying standards of living and quality of living that we would explore a little bit later. So this chart depicts by career stream different levels of compensation from the lowest level to the highest level. Only looking at those 5 countries that we've selected. Angola, shooting out the lights. Typically, if a country has oil and gas, high cost of living, low quality of living, high levels of compensation. Typically, we can think about Angola, Nigeria, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea. And there are some other countries that are also factored in here. Typically, most expensive countries, West Africa, least expensive countries, Southern Africa. So Kenya and Morocco on this specific graph typically tracks quite closely from a compensation point of view. So this graph depicts guaranteed cash. We're going to break down the guaranteed cash into different components. In DRC, you get paid 12 months basic salary. You also get paid 13 mois, 14 mois, 15 mois, and 16th check. There's a company that pay 17 checks in DRC per year. Then they also have, I think it's called pécule de congé, so the holiday leave bonus. CEO of one company, the leave bonus, $100,000 US. So to do business in Africa is also expensive in pockets, but not as a rule across the continent. So from a benefits point of view, this slide and the next 2 slides depict 3 core benefits: life insurance, medical, and private retirement. Life insurance is a benefit that is offered but not necessarily valued on the continent. I just want to take some time to explain the legends and how to read the specific graph. On the left-hand side, lightest blue is the lowest, grey is the lowest at about 0% or not covered, rolling all the way up to dark blue, which is the highest level of coverage. So Morocco, up there as one of the countries that provides the highest level from a coverage point of view, other insurance to its employees. A benefit that is not valued, but very necessary. The next graph looks at retirement contributions. So this is in addition to Social Security. Social Security in many countries has been established years ago and really has not kept up with changes in the local market. This can be seen from countries like Sudan, Central African Republic, Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, where little coverage is provided. Morocco, South Africa, Kenya, in the highest tiers when it comes to retirement contribution. This is a difficult justification to make towards employees, specifically young employees like myself, and I can definitely say Amin, because young people today do not care about benefits, medical retirement. They care about driving a BMW today. They care about what is the net amount of cash that I can have in my pocket as soon as possible. When we contribute to retirement as organizations, we contribute to medical. It is for the welfare of our employees. But they do not value those benefits, and they do not see the value of those benefits. Benefits that they value we'll get to in a few moments. And it has really got to do with, I would say, the youth of today. Myself as well. I want to drive a Porsche today. I don't care about assurance, retraite complémentaire, and medical. It's not important to me. The last one is medical. So medical on the continent is something that's very important and necessary. It also comes at a high cost to organizations. Medical throughout the continent is one of those benefits that are provided throughout. When you do business in Africa, you will typically provide medical for your employee, the spouse, and children, typically capped at 4. I have visited companies where there were as many as 11 dependents covered by the medical. It is the sisters' children, the brothers' sisters' children, and it really lacks controls overall. And medical is really one of those expenses which can hurt organizations if not planned for this. I just quickly want to tell you a short story. Some plans do not have the coverage for cancer. And specifically also, cancer cannot be covered in certain African countries from a treatment point of view. I was working with a client in Tanzania where the employees of that organization said that they realized that one family member of an employee, his wife, has cancer. They decided to not take an increase in that year, but for their increase and bonus pool to pay for the medical cover of that employee abroad. And I think that's another key about African business. We are focused on relationships. We are focused on care and the interest of looking out for one another. So from a compensation mix point of view, looking at this specific graph, the first portion of the graph is basic salary. That is the light blue portion, followed by cash allowances in darker blue. Dark blue is the non-guaranteed bonus, and green the benefits. In Nigeria, the bottom portion of the graph, you will see that the cash allowance component is quite broad. In Nigeria, you get paid multiple cash allowances based on local legislation. You will get housing, furniture, 13th check, holiday bonus, entertainment allowance, travel allowance, and various other allowances paid to you. The concern around all these allowances is the fact that retirement is based off of base. In Francophone Africa, we get two kinds of salary, salaire de base and sur-salaire. And sometimes the contributions is only based on salaire de base, not on sur-salaire, which reduces the ability and capabilities of employees to plan for retirement. A company that I've met in Cameroon pays 207 different allowances to employees. 207. Very administrative, but driven by market practice. So this slide looks at the combination or the compensation mix. Benefits typically consist of about 30% across the board as we move up in the organization. Next chart, exact same chart, but looking at managers, followed by top management. You can see that Ivory Coast has a quite large portion depicted in benefits specifically. So what are the benefits that employees value? In Senegal, there's a company that during Ramadan gives goat allowances, or a goat as a gift for Ramadan. In DRC, they give a turkey allowance to staff. Once again, I've mentioned that cars, it's not about at an executive level whether you get a car or not, but rather the type of car and the color of the car that you receive. In Nigeria, it's critical to have a generator. And the bargaining is typically around, do I have two generators, one small one for the house and one bigger one for my other house that I own? And also, how many liters of fuel do I get with my generator? Free company gifts is important. Christmas gifts or holiday gifts are important. A cell phone is very important. Maybe flight tickets that are paid by the organization for employees to travel abroad are also some of the benefits that I've seen offered in the market. One benefit, highly valued, is company product. Companies like Nestlé, Mondelez give their staff certain company product for their benefit. It would be wonderful. Anybody works for a bank in the room? So as Mondelez, the bank can give you money as a company product. One thing that's very important is the company provided canteen. So often for the lower level cadre of employees, it is important to substitute or at least provide one meal at the office for them to provide sustenance for their family with the money that they receive. We're going to look a little bit about global mobility. So when we talk about mobility, it is Mercer's terms for expatriates. So mobility is really the movement around the continent. So once again, what is important when looking at Africa, what are you looking for? You're looking for stability. We've seen that compensation in Morocco is stable, the inflation is stable, employment is stable, and the growth outlook is stable for the foreseeable future. But what about the currency volatility? So this slide depicts currency changes in 1 year compared to the euro for various countries. There are only two countries on this chart where the change is in single digits. It's South Africa and Morocco. High level of volatility that takes place on the continent. When you do the exact same chart compared to US dollars, there is even a higher level of volatility that takes place. This impacts companies from a cost point of view, specifically when they employ expatriates or when they pay foreign currency premiums to certain providers. I think it's maybe also a good time to say that Mercer does bill in US dollars, so to hedge us from this volatility risk. So once again, the stability point of view is very important. You want to be able to predict to a large extent what will happen in a market with the variable factors that you know. Currency is how we pay people, but determining how we pay people is influenced by several factors. Mercer conducts quality of living and cost of living studies across the continent. We've ranked the countries, first slide, cost of living point of view. Countries cheaper than Morocco is Egypt. Countries more expensive than Morocco, Angola, Cote d'Ivoire, Nairobi, and Lagos. So you would have seen that the compensation charts are trending for Kenya and Morocco, typically similar, but it's more expensive to live in Kenya than what it is to live in Morocco. So I'm not saying for all items, but certain items are more expensive. Overall, Morocco is cheaper than those other countries. The second factor that's very important is quality of living. And this is where we look at the quality of life that the inhabitants of that country have. And Morocco, compared to all of these countries, far exceed the quality of life when compared to these markets. Angola has one of the worst quality of living scores on the continent. I think the worst is Chad in N'Djamena City, and also Somalia to a large extent. But as you can see, the flag and the base, Morocco well positioned compared to the other markets. So when we bring expatriates to these markets, we typically also have to provide them suitable accommodation, which adds to costs. A room in Angola, I think it's 140 or 160 square meters, can easily cost $15,000 a month. The cost has reduced. At some stage, houses, you had to pay the rent 2 years in advance and could be anything from $25,000 to $40,000 a month. There was a massive undersupply of housing in the market, which has now been fixed to a large extent. Morocco and Kenya, once again, comparing well when looking at the prices of houses, far lower than the 9,000 euro that we're currently encountering in Angola, Luanda. Schooling is another important factor that we need to look out for. And the access to local schooling. Morocco, well positioned, between 13 and 16,000 euros year on year, whereas in Angola, 47,000 euros that is paid for schooling. That is an incredible amount of money to pay for schooling. What if your employee has 4 children, 5 children? We work with an organization where the schooling for that incumbent is $250,000 per year for one person. So I ask myself, how much money does that person make for the organization if school is only $250,000? There are several ways that you can determine remuneration when looking at expatriates in Africa. The first one is a home approach. You have a host approach, and the home approach is really a balance sheet calculation, where you try and equalize 2 items. Well, 3 items in essence: the cost of living, quality of living, and tax. So the idea is that you want to move person A from location A to location B and place him in the same quality and cost of living point of view that he would have been when employed in his home country. So there are different methodologies that are followed in the African continent. So in this specific case study, I'm going to really only stand still at, let me go to the third chart. This looks at local national compensation in France, and then so this is the local national compensation in France. This is what a local national would earn in Egypt, and this is what a French expatriate would earn when you expatriate them from France to Egypt. So you can see that the additional costs that are added up here, that adds to the remuneration bill of an organization specifically. There are massive implications when you take a wrong decision or get rid of employees. In Ghana, severance is based on negotiation. So, common trends and impacts on success of assignments is twofold. The first one that I really just want to touch on is the family. Assignments fail or succeed based on the adaptation of a family to the new local environment. Kids make friends. The husband or the wife, the working partner, has the ability to work, but it is the partner who is not working that often struggles to adapt. That's why cultural training is extremely important, to sensitize people to that specific visit. So you all will know from a context point of view that we live on a vast continent that is dissected into different sections. from the north to the south, east and west, different cultures, different languages, and it's very important for a successful assignment to be aware of this. You can think of an American that has never left the US borders, thinks that Africa is one country, how difficult it is for them to adapt. That is why it's so crucial to also employ as much as possible local talent within a specific country. So I'm going to just quickly, you can read the specific slide, but I'm looking at Morocco, Nigeria, and Kenya. What is important is relationships when doing business. The ability to confirm public conversations in private and to make sure that you observe a high level of confidence. We often go to meetings and chit-chat before we start. We ask you, how's the family? How's your wife? How's your cat? How's your dog? How's your mother-in-law? How's your father-in-law? Those things are important. When you work for a German company, there are none of those. There is, hi, what are the numbers? Yes, above 1, no, below 1, we are going ahead or we're not going ahead. But within the African context, it's so important to foster these relationships. And it is the same across Kenya, Morocco, or even if we look at Nigeria. One thing that I just want to line out for Nigeria specifically is the last point, that you need to dress stylishly to establish your status within the specific continent. I think one can say that about our Nigerian colleagues. So I want to wrap up with certain items. So it's important that you may have global policies, but you need to adapt them for local realities. From a compensation point of view, we look at cash, and it is important to not only focus on basic salary, because there are multiple other payments that take place in the market. Benefits are also key. And finally, if you have a mobility policy, one size does not fit all. You need to make room for certain adjustments, but be aware that the exception does not become the rule. So this is the last slide that I'm going to share. And this is really summarizing Africa in 6 key headlines. To say talk about Africa in 30 minutes is to say, tell me about your religion in 2 minutes. It is physically impossible. But as I've started, Africa is VUCA. When I started, I said VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But for me, from an African context, it means something else. It means versatile. It means that Africa is unique, that we are competitive, and that we have abundant resources, and that we are exceptionally ambitious in our approach. Yes, there's uneven talent attractiveness across the specific countries. Yes, we have to try and source talent locally as much as possible. We have the population to be and to feed the nations of the world, from an agricultural point of view, as well as a brain power point of view. We have incredible talent. Yes, there's disparity in salary policies with uneven pay across the continent. But it has changed over a long period of time that I've been working on the continent. There is inadequate pensions, as we've seen from the specific slide, but there are certain providers supplementing that pension in the market. What is important, it is the ability for organizations to help employees understand the necessity of the benefits that we've looked at. And finally, and most importantly, the success of companies that I've seen is centered around thinking globally, but really acting and adapting for local circumstances. If you do think that copying and pasting what works in one country, you can duplicate in another, it doesn't work like that in Africa. 54 countries, 54 presidents, several multiple currencies. There is no one size fits all. So I really want you to leave tonight to think about Africa from a VUCA point of view, from the versatility point of view, that it is not uncertain, but it is unique. It is not complex, but it is competitive. And it's not ambiguous, but it is really ambitious in what we would like to achieve. That is Africa in 30 minutes. Thank you.